Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thanks. Well, welcome to the May 18th Planning Commission, Annapolis Planning Commission meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. First order of business is the roll call.
Mr. Pine,
Present.
Ms. Pico,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Mr. Waldman. I see him.
Present.
Mr. Sale, I don't see him. Mr. Imes
Present.
and Mr. Svakianudis. Mr. Chairman, we currently have 5 members present.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. Okay, let me share today's agenda. So next order of business is approval of the agenda. Anybody have any issues with the order? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, agenda is approved. Thank you all. Next is approval of minutes from May 4th, the last meeting. I trust everybody's had a chance to look at those. And anybody have any questions? They were pretty straightforward. I'd entertain a motion to approve those as sent to us.
So moved.
You have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on those? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Any
have to
nays?
abstain because I missed it.
Okay, thank you. And so 1 abstain and no nays. All righty, thank you. The minutes are approved. Okay, so on to the meat of tonight's meeting. So we have 3 items. 2 are continuation from our last meeting, and then a third. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to that. The first one is continuation of the public hearing for capital improvement plan, CIP ordinance 01423. So we heard from Public Works with a presentation on that last time, and we opened the public hearing, and it is open till today. And as far as I know, we have received no further comments, either written, and there's nobody signed up to speak tonight. So I would, at this point, close the public hearing and bring us into a discussion on what we heard and the deliberation on that and the vote. So, does anybody want to start us off with what we talked about?
Since I missed the meeting, I'm
Yeah.
not going to, and I didn't watch it, I'm not going to be able to add anything to the discussion.
Well, I mean, what was really highlighted were many projects like street and parks, and a lot were around both active and passive recreation opportunities in the city that have been long talked about. And I think those are very, very worthy projects, in addition to, the plethora of other things that around the city that are ongoing in the capital improvement plan. So I'm very much in favor of it. I think it's, and I really appreciate the new initiatives and the money that's coming to be able to maintain, do larger maintenance or renovation of facilities that we have in the city. I thought that was very well presented. So I'm in favor.
I agree. And I'll make a motion to approve what was presented. Second.
Great. So we have a motion and hello, Tom.
How you doing?
Good. So we have a motion and a second. So any further discussion? Anybody want to add some comments?
No, I was
Yeah.
just impressed with the variety of different options, when we talked a little bit about the transportation or just like the bridges and the trails and so on. So I was just impressed with that. And then the additional improvements for parking lots and different additions of docks and so on. So I'm just glad there was a variety of options and things that are being considered.
I want to second what Alex pointed out, and this is, there have been many of these projects have been talked about for years, and they're coming to the fore and they're going to get done. And I think we should use the largesse that the city has now and being put to good use.
Right, well, let's, I think we can take a vote. All in favor of approving the capital improvement, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? And we have one abstention.
Yes.
For Diane, yeah. Great, well, so let me ask if there's a volunteer to write that up for us to submit to the city council recommending the capital, the 23-24 capital improvement plan. Do I have to assign somebody?
I'll do it.
All right, thank you, Teresa, I appreciate it. Okay, so on to the next item. That is let's quote the right number here. So it's PD 2022-001. It is I won't read the whole thing, but it's basically for the Willows project. So as we heard last week, we had a presentation by the developer, and we opened the public hearing. And based on and so we did hear, we'd had some written testimony that was submitted, but nobody's here to speak in person. But before we close the public hearing, based on some of the comments we made, the developer has made a few modifications, and so I wanted to give them an opportunity to share those modifications with us. That the changes were sent around, but I want to give them an opportunity to make that presentation to us. So with that, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Dirk
Yes,
Schwenk
Mr. Schwenk.
for
Great.
the development team. You heard from us 2 weeks ago, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. We've just got a few quick things based on the feedback from last week and some of my sense of things that might be worthwhile to sort of emphasize here. So we did submit, and Mr. Schuman will testify in a moment and answer any questions you might have, an updated site plan that included some additional sidewalks and increased the buffer from Forest Drive to the building nearest Forest Drive to the amount that was requested in the staff report by Mr. Smith. And there's also, you'll see there's a measurement, there's some questions about access to park. There's some measurements there. And we also included an updated shared parking agreement that, sort of fleshes out some of those issues a little more firmly than they were before. And I just wanted to mention, I'm gonna ask Mr. Hudson to speak just briefly, but one of the things that I've been really struck with about this project, that even the first time that I listened to some of the public hearing or the comment sessions, not really the public hearing, but is that Ingerman as a developer, which is ultimately the developer behind this project, is a little bit different than a lot of other projects that I'm familiar with, and maybe that you're familiar with too. You may be more familiar with them, but just in the sense that they're not just this sort of builder. They put it up and they hand it over to somebody else. This is a really long-term commitment for them. I believe their bonds require them to be involved for 15 years, but for all of the projects, and they have lots of other Willows type projects, they actually remain, involved for decades, not just, a year here and there and put it up and leave. So I just wanted to get Mr. Hudson to speak just briefly on that before we turn it over to Mr. Schuman on the updated plan. Do we have, I know we had David Hudson on here somewhere.
David Holden.
Sorry, Holden.
Okay.
Right. Holden. Is he still here?
He is on. It looks like he might be having issues with He's not.
Okay. Well, why don't we, maybe we'll have Mr. Schuman start that and we can sort that out in the way.
Sure.
Oh, wait, here he is.
No, I think he's having technical issues. If you want to go to Mr. Schuman, though, I'm going to reach out to him now.
Eric, do you want me to go then?
I think so. Mr. Chairman, is that the appropriate thing to do? I can't tell what's going on from your end.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think this gets to the meat of it, and if Mr. Holden has some comments, he certainly can chime in, maybe after Mr. Schuman's done, when he gets his connectivity issue
Great.
sorted. Thanks.
Sure. So good evening, Terry Schuman, Bay Engineering. So from our last meeting, and this was the site plan that we presented at the last meeting. There was some discussion about one of the conditions in the opinion was that the building should be moved back 20 more feet for a 40-foot setback to the property line, which would then provide a 70-foot setback from the curb line. And we talked about a couple of different ways to do that. So after the meeting, we went forward and made some changes, and I'll go through these. So first off, we removed a couple spaces here off the parking lot, and we're able to bring down the parking lot by a width of a parking space, 8.5 feet. We also shrunk the buffer between the building and the curb. So before we shaved off 10 more feet off that. So with that reduction in this front setback and then reduction of this parking space, we were able to get a 40-foot setback as requested. And actually off this bump out, and I guess let me so we have a 40-foot setback, and then we have a 68-foot setback from the point of the building right there to the curb of Forest Drive. So we complied with condition number 3 by doing that. I think that was a big discussion in our last hearing. So here's in red what we did. So we increased the buffer to Forest Drive. We shifted the building by 20 feet further away from Forest Drive to achieve that setback request. And we moved the sidewalk up along the curb, provided green area, very similar to what we did on the other buildings. And then we have a 10-foot, a 10-foot setback, and we have adequate for foundation planning in front of the building. Lost 2 spaces as we indicated right here, and just basically shifted everything south, planned south. And then these were the 2 spaces that we added toward the American Legion way. Some of the other things we did, there was some discussion about why the sidewalk was all the way over here in relationship to the crosswalk across Forest Drive. So we shifted it, as we discussed, over to here. So it brings it very close to the crosswalk. And then some other connectivity. Provided a connectivity, or actually provided a sidewalk along American Legion down there to the Skipper Lane extension. So there's an interconnection on the American Legion site as well. And then interconnection between the sites. We added a sidewalk between the playground and building. We call it Building C here, as well as a sidewalk connection up. So have good connectivity up to Forest Drive, good connectivity between the sites. And I believe those were mostly what we had talked about. So I just wanted to show you that we took what you heard and we made the changes. And I believe you were all presented this maybe today. One of the other things I just wanted to talk about was I think Planning Commissioner Teresa, you had some concerns or some questions on the recreation area. And this is a park locator from the city generated the computer information that we can get from the city website. And this just shows our site in relationship to Annapolis Walk. I can't do it down to a half acre, but or a half mile radius. This is a mile radius from our site. And you can see the Annapolis Walk is within it. And I'll get to the half acre in a second. So the next slide is just we just wanted to show you from the city park trails and playgrounds that Annapolis Walk is a community area. For the city, it's 3 acres in size. And then this is just the record plat that created the recreation area. And then these are just some deeds that were all gave it to the public and allowed the city to use that, the general public to use those. So the last slide I just wanted to show you was, we took from, here's our project site, and so it's measured as a radius from the project site. But I wanted to show you that if we took a side, if we started on a path, walked down the sidewalk and walked down all the roads to get to that park, we would be at 1.39 miles. So it's well within the half mile radius as required by the APF code. But it from a measurement, when you walk from the limits of the property to the site, it's 0.39 acres, which is within the half mile. And that was all reviewed and approved by the Rec and Parks Division. But I know there was a question last time, so we just wanted to clarify that. But I think with that, Dirk, any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
So is the location of the sidewalk that goes out to the shared use path at the base of the crosswalk, was that actually moved, or is the other connection on the other side of the building exist still, or?
No, we took that connection off. So we moved the connection over closer to the.
So what sort of left on the other side? The only reason I mention that is, I mean, I don't really know whether people would still, go this way where the other sidewalk was, but,
we have a stormwater system over here. So. Okay.
So that there's, it's not going to be a convenient path for somebody to like scoot around that, because generally if it's sort of convenient, you'll end up with a desire path, as they call it. But if the stormwater ponds are like right in the middle, that's probably not going to happen. So, okay.
Yeah, we believe it will not, and that's why we put it over here.
Okay. Well, I think getting it to the base of the crosswalk is really the important thing, because that's the most likely destination. That if you're going sort of down Forest Drive, more than likely you're gonna go Skipper's Lane because it's gonna be nicer.
Yep.
Anyway, okay, thanks.
All right, and David, are you available now?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
No?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm here. Nothing?
Yeah,
We can hear you,
hear you.
David.
Good evening. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. So I think what I just want to do, and we submitted a letter to kind of lay this out, is that we've done, as Dirk mentioned, more than 100 developments like this, and we feel like this plan balances what we feel is a good design that also incorporates the feedback we've gotten from the staff, from the commissioners, and feel that it's what needed to be a successful project. And as Dirk mentioned, also we're not just the developer, we'll be the general contractor, and then we'll be the manager and the owner. So along with HIP and Mary Ann Dillon, we'll be part of this project and part of the community for decades. So we have every interest in it being a quality design and a successful project. So I thank you for your consideration tonight.
Yeah, so that's based on the feedback we got last time. Those were the things I thought were really crucial to highlight. I really do. Not that my feelings on this matter, but I believe that this project would be a real asset to the city. Workforce housing and the extension of Skipper's Lane, and it has been improved through the planning process, and I think it's going to be a good project. So we hope you will vote to approve that. And if you have any other questions for any of us, we're here, but we would just love to see this get approved so it can move forward.
Alex, I have a couple of questions for Mr. Schuman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Schuman, why is it that the sidewalk to Forest Drive does not connect directly with the crosswalk across Forest Drive?
You mean right here?
Yeah, why is there a 10-foot or difference between where that little sidewalk ends and where the crosswalk begins? Why doesn't it feed directly to the bottom of the crosswalk?
Oh, angle it in, we could absolutely do, and we could angle it in, sure, we could.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
good. Second question. And if you could scroll down your plan to the bottom. Yeah, the building on the bottom left. Is there an entrance on the back, on the side facing the American Legion? A ground floor entrance to the building? In other words, there's an entrance off the parking lot. Does that go all the way through?
To my understanding is that it does not, and maybe David, if you have a different.
It does not.
There is not an entrance to the building from the Legion side. The entrance would be to the plan right side of the building.
Okay. All right, well, if there were, I would, okay, there's not. Okay. As a result of your change in the location of the first building, excuse me, the Forest Drive building, we'll call it, are there any changes to your landscaping plan?
There will be. We did not have time to do it for this, but there will be. I mean, we'll move our foundations up against the building here. So.
No, I'm talking about on the other side.
Oh, on the other side. Oh,
Yeah.
sure. With 20 more feet there, we will have more additional plantings that we could provide there.
Okay. Those are the only questions I had relating to this.
Great. Anybody else have questions? And I think once we get into deliberations, if the development team would stick around just in case we have additional questions as we discuss, that would be appreciated. But any other clarification questions on these revised plans from the rest of the commission? Okay, well, thank you guys, and stick around in case we do have subsequent questions. So as I mentioned, the public hearing is still open on this, and so we received four pieces of written testimony, all in very much in support of the project. So far of the written testimony we have received, it's all been overwhelmingly positive. And there's nobody else signed up to speak tonight. So at this point, I will close the public hearing and thank everybody for their testimony in writing. We appreciate that. And at this point, we are open to start discussing and deliberating what we think we should do with our decision on the project. So I'll open the floor to anybody that wants to lead off.
Well,
And by the way, I see Mr. Sale has joined us too, which is good. So anyway,
I'm in. I had to
wanna-
dial back in.
Great. Well, thanks for getting here. Bob, you want to start us off?
me?
Yeah, you were
Okay.
starting to talk.
I will.
Seemed like you wanted to.
First of all, I guess I'd start off by saying that I have thought a lot about this project. And about what I think about it and the history of it before the Planning Commission. So I'm not, whatever I have to say, hopefully you'll agree that you'll see that I have, it's not been taken lightly with me. And I want to clearly understood that I personally am very much in favor of affordable housing, having had a daughter, looking for housing in the city of Annapolis. It's been part of a talk and planning for the past 15, 20 years about the missing middle, which is a very descriptive term for what we kind of housing that we need to make a society which is better rounded and more productive. So I have no qualms with affordable housing. I think that affordable housing in this place is well cited and is well considered. And I think that probably this company is well experienced and to carry out this project should it succeed. But I'm also charged as a planning commissioner with looking primarily at site design. I'm not looking at who's going to own the property, although that does sometimes play a role in our considerations. But really what our job is to look at site design. And I want to go back to the work sessions that we had, in which it was made very clear that basically what you have here are 3 buildings around a parking lot. And I expressed my thoughts at the time, and I think that other people expressed their thoughts at the time. And the development team, I don't know what they took from that. But basically, this is the site design that we've got. And while I think that affordable housing is a necessity for the city of Annapolis, and that it's to be encouraged, and that we as a planning commission and a planning department should do everything we possibly can to facilitate their permitting and review processes. Nonetheless, people who live in affordable or workforce housing deserve the same qualities of design that anybody in a wealthier neighborhood deserves. Everybody deserves good design. You live with good design and bad design forever. Well, that's a bit of a hyperbolic statement, but you do live with it for decades. And so in spite of what was said at the work sessions, in spite of the kinds of comments that were made, and in spite of the various proposals of alternatives that were made, basically what came back are 3 buildings around a parking lot. And what's really at the heart of this is that why we're in this situation that we're in is that in order to get the density that this developer needs financially, and I respect that they needed a bigger parcel than what they had there, this whatever the name of the parcel is. And so they joined it up with the American Legion and created double the size of the parcel included in the application. And so therefore they could get the density that they would not get otherwise. And so then what we have is a very dense 3 buildings around a parking lot. And I caution the American Legion that their property is now part of a planned development. And if they intend to make any major improvements to their site, that they are going to have to go through a fairly difficult and complex, can be difficult and complex permitting process, because that would require a change to this planned development and to the plat and so forth and so on. So I think, the changes that were made since last time are necessary. They're not crucial to the basic design, and it's the basic design to which I have qualms. I'm quite aware that my position is unpopular. It won't be the first time in my life that I've been in an unpopular position. But I do feel some requirement within myself to stick to my principles of what I think are good design. And I am very uncomfortable with the design of this project. If the project is approved, or if somebody makes a motion to approve the project, I would suggest two conditions, minor. One would be that the landscaping plan include heavy landscape buffering between the first building and Forest Drive. On the Forest Drive setback is probably the best way to state that. And the second thing is just to make sure that that sidewalk joins up with the Forest Drive crosswalk. But I think you can tell from my comments about which way I'm going to go on this project. And with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, thanks for those comments. Anybody else want to go at this point?
I will.
Go ahead, Tom. Yeah.
So I don't see the same issues with the site design as Bob does. I appreciate the changes that have been made along the way. And I love that these guys stay involved with the project all the way through. I'm glad to see more workforce housing and hope it continues. That's it.
Thanks. David?
So I understand what Bob is saying. It's not quite ideal, but I'm glad that the developers addressed some of the issues we talked about last time. I'm a little confused on the buffer. I believe they said that they did increase the buffer on Forest Drive. Is that correct?
Yeah,
And,
that's correct.
and I appreciate the fact that Bob brought up the sidewalk. That's definitely something that has to be done. I also am happy that they kind of clarified the parking situation with the VFW and looked at the APF distance, because I was a little concerned about that. If it's 0.39 miles, 0.6 was, that Teresa said, was pretty close to 0.5, that I was a little concerned about that. So I'm glad that's been clarified. So I'm somewhat happy with this. I'm pretty happy with this. That's it.
Great. Thanks. Teresa?
So I'm in alignment with Mr. Waldman on his initial concerns in the working session and how we've come into this. And I do share his disappointment with the site design as it was presented. However, in the evolution over the last several weeks and different iterations, I'm impressed with the things that were addressed, that could be addressed based on whatever limitations the applicant determined that they were unwilling or unable to change. I am satisfied with the changes that were made, with the clarifications and the specificity of some of the issues that were raised in the last meeting. So I recognize why this may not be the optimum design. I am satisfied with close, better than before, close, and it is moving in that direction. But I would hope that in the future, as we see future developments in this area, that we take into consideration Mr. Waldman's comments that, every resident in the city deserves the same amenities with the same style and design and so on, that we are now going to try to encourage going forward. That should be the minimum. And so with that, I'm satisfied with what was presented. I'm happy to support the project going forward with some of the conditions that Mr. Waldman laid out, and of course the conditions laid out within the staff report as well.
Thanks, Teresa. Ben?
I'll go next.
Yeah.
You guys have heard me say a lot about the process of working groups with the Planning Commission and getting to where we get to before we end up already having to hear a project and it's already 3/4 baked. And this one, to me, I get it. With all due respect I don't even want to say that, but we're asking for a big road to be built through on the rear end of the property. That's a lot to ask for anybody to help join up the rest of what we're going to have to complete something we've really wanted for a lot of years. I get that, but we're still cramming people into a small location, and it's like we're finding a way around our rules that are built to have better planning and better development. We're finding a way to consider that other piece of property part of it. And we'll just lock that one up and still cram people into these units around the parking lot. I really wish we could give people workforce housing that's much better than what we've done for the last 50 to 70 years. The square footage of cramming people in there, not enough parking spots. And if you go right up the highway, we've got other developments that we've done back in the 80s and the 90s where people are having problems parking everywhere. You got a lot of people working, bringing work trucks home, a lot of people trying to cram into these apartments, and it just doesn't work. I just don't see how this many people or this many units can be crammed on that property successfully and still have enough area for children to play, enough area for parking, and enough area to go walk your dog and have a decent time. I can see that once you get the road and you eliminate a lot of that, and kids can go walk to the middle school and play on the fields. And that's a big consideration for me. The fact you'll have a road and you can walk over there. And it's not going to be that far. So you do have some recreation ability, but it's just too many units packed into one place. But again, we're still talking about this. I'm willing to hear from the rest of the commissioners, and we're going to get a road out of it. We're going to get some workforce housing, and not the size I'd like to see people living in. Too small, in my opinion. I think we really need to grow and go forward and give better workforce housing than we do. We really do. But I'd like to hear what the rest of the commission would say. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. I think that leaves me here. So my sense on this is, in terms of architecture and that kind of stuff, that's somewhat subjective. And what really is important to me is, how's this development going to function for people that live there? Is it just going to work right? And I think a lot of the connectivity that's been added, especially since our last meeting, I really like. It's going to make how people get in and out of the units, interact with the rest of the community. I really like that. And I think in terms of whether it faces a parking lot or has some other layout, to a certain extent, given these other connectivity things, that is a little, it is mitigated by these other connectivity things. So it is a little bit subjective in terms of the site layout of whether there's a big park in the middle and parking on the side, or I think I'm okay. I'm okay with the way it is. It might subjectively might not be the choice that I would make, but one of the things, if I'm being sort of intellectually consistent here, is this, and I really like that the developer is going to manage the property for a long period of time, because they have a lot of experience with developing and managing this kind of development. And if they say it's going to work, I have to trust them, because especially about the amount of parking, for example. I've always said that we shouldn't have minimum parking requirements. We should trust that the developer knows their market and knows how to build the development, and especially when they're going to stay and manage it, they know how much parking they need. So they're happy with the amount of parking that's there. So I have to trust them on that. And sort of the same goes with knowing that their clients and how they might operate with respect to getting out of the buildings and arriving by car. And so I'm while it might not be my choice subjectively, I'm very understanding of why they've done things that way, and I have to take their word for it. I think Bob's comment, and I've had this concern generally about planned developments, and this is more just an editorial, but I think he's kind of on the money in terms of what burdens in the future this might place on the Legion in terms of what they want to do forward. There's generally no free lunch, and in this case, joining the two properties to make it all work is okay. I mean, that's what the plan development code was meant to do, to give flexibility to make these kinds of things work, especially in infill projects. That said, it does tie them permanently to the rest of the property, and that's really not for me to say it's good or bad. It just is. But and I'm sure they know that. But something to think about. And it is. I do think it. If there were more space in a way to do it, I think more active recreation, that's sort of on site or next to the property would have been desirable, because there might be especially teenage kids living there that want to have a little bit more space for active recreation. And having to go down the street isn't always ideal, but I mean, it's fortunately that the rest of that area off Forest Drive is very easy to walk to, and slow speed streets, and they're very pedestrian friendly. So that's at least a plus. So in general, I think like every other infill project, there are going to be compromises, and I think they've done well with the situation they have to get units that look like, at least certainly from the architectural layout plans, look like nice size units. And I trust they'll be built in a quality way that will last. And I think they'll be very nice places to live in, very nice apartments to live in. So I'm very much in favor, and that's the way I'm going to go here. So I think we've all gone around the horn, and let me just ask if anybody has any go backs based on things we've all said. If you want to make any additions. Well, so let me also add, I think at this point, I have no concerns with meeting all the plan development criteria. I think we've gone through a lot of that, so I think the developers met the burden of meeting the requirements in the code. Anybody have, besides the sort of design pieces, does anybody have any other comments about that? And specifically I think we should specifically discuss the variance that was asked to touch the priority forest, on the south, on the lower right part of the property. That's something that's within our purview to decide, that I think we need to address here.
That doesn't really bother me. So you can go ahead with everybody else.
Well, I mean, I'll chime in. I think in our last meeting in asking about the criteria to disturb that priority forest, I'm satisfied that the criteria have been met. That there's really no other option given the desire to do what we've asked them to do with Skipper's Lane and how it connects through the adjacent properties. And given the priority in the city for that road and the type of road it is, I think they've met the criteria for disturbing that priority forest. Anybody else have any questions or comments about that? So any approval of this project would include the approval of that variance to the Forest Conservation Act. I thought that was important to bring up explicitly here. So anybody? So I see Mr. Schwenk has raised his hand. Do you have a comment that you want to make?
Are we going to hear from the applicant again?
I don't think so. Not unless anybody has any questions.
I have none.
We're the same number of units now as when we started the package in the work sessions, correct?
Correct. Yep, 58.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we have no other questions, I would entertain a motion to approve this project.
I will make a motion to approve the project with the condition of making sure that the sidewalk connects to the crosswalk at Forest Drive.
And at the suggestion about do you want to add the comment about the heavy buffering? I think that's reasonable.
I thought they already addressed that.
No.
He mentioned heavy landscape within that buffer zone.
Oh, okay. So I will amend that to say that there would be heavy landscaping in the buffer zone between Forest Drive and the Forest Drive and the units against Forest Drive.
Well, I'll second that motion. Is there any discussion on this motion on the floor? Hearing none, I'd like to call for a vote on this. Kimberly, could you go around the horn just to be explicit about this?
Of course. Mr. Pline,
I approve.
Ms. Butler,
I have to abstain.
Ms. Pico,
Approve.
Mr. Imes,
Approve.
Mr. Waldman,
Nay.
Mr. Spacionutis,
Approve.
and Mr. Sale.
Nay.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we have 4 yeses, 2 noes, and an abstention.
Great. Well, the approval carries it. So I would say congratulations to the developer, and I'm happy for the city of Annapolis to have this project go forward. So congratulations, and let's go forward.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you everybody for their hard work to get this finally to us, to the city staff and department staff. It's been a tough road because of things certainly out of our control, but I'm happy that it's finally got to us, and we've been able to get this through our process expeditiously and get it onto you. So we will work on our order and opinion, and hopefully we're getting better at that than our last one. Getting the sort of bugs worked out. So hopefully that will be coming within our statutory limit. So thank you all very much. Okay, let me move on to the next item here. Okay, so we are it's our third item, which is ordinance 1523, which is building height elevation limits and elevation limits exception for FEMA flood zones in Annapolis. So this has to do with requirements from FEMA about how we measure building heights and changes that are introduced to deal with those. So as is typical that we do here, Mr. Lashinsky from Planning and Zoning staff will give us a presentation on the details of those, and we can certainly ask questions of Mr. Lashinsky and any other staff here as we hear about that and what that entails. And then we'll open the public hearing, and I think we have 2 people signed up to testify on this after when we get to that point. So Eric, can you take it away? I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have several people in the wings right now that should be brought forward. Okay, it looks like they are here. Eileen is here, Matt Fleming, John Manasseh, Bryce, the mayor. Yeah, Eileen is here as the representative for the CDOC Action Committee, and was going to start with an overview, I think, of how we got to this point. So let me pull up the presentation that she provided.
And Eric, while you're doing that, I think the mayor had wanted to make a couple of comments, and I believe Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. It's a little bit of an echo, but
Too many people are off mute.
Is that better? It's still echo. I believe David Gerald is also here.
If everybody else could mute while she's talking, that would help. Thank you.
Okay, try again.
Is David Gerald here?
He is not just yet, Eileen.
He was a couple minutes ago. That sounds better. Why don't you, the mayor had some introductory comments, and then Eric, if you could pull up the slides right after the mayor's finished, and then I'll share the quick overview with the commission and then turn it over to you.
Sure.
Can I go? I will welcome everybody and thank you, everybody. Can you all hear me? Okay, so today is one of my greatest days in the 5 years that I've been mayor, because you just approved the Willows. So I want to say a big thank you for that. But really, why I'm here, and I want to use that quote, success has 1,000 fathers or mothers, and failure is an orphan. We are on the cusp of one of the most major developments in this city's history, and that is, first of all, the success of the rebuilding of the Hillman Garage and the pace that has happened. It has really put a positive spin, and there are thousands of people behind that initiative. And what that initiative leads to. And then, of course, one of the biggest things will happen to this city to protect this city, and that being the city dock plan. And these things have been talked about for decades, but we are about to really move forward and make them happen. And why we need to concentrate specifically in this one area now with this ordinance is that we have an amazing construction team in place. Whiting Turner have delivered the garage in a little bit over a year, a garage that represented one of our big threats in this city, a garage that had concrete cancer that had been declared past its useful life in 2013. That garage is no more. There is a brand new state-of-the-art garage that people will be ready to park in June, and then we'll provide a lot more spaces and net gain in spaces for our summer that's upon us. And then it will lead to what is going to be an amazing public space and a waterfront welcome center that is much needed. We are one of the most important waterfront cities on the East Coast of America, and it is embarrassing the condition of our harbor master, our bathrooms, our boater bathrooms, our boater showers, our boater laundry facilities. That needs to change, and to make that change, we have to adjust the floodplain so we can design a building on the waterfront where our harbor master can actually see the waterfront, and we have to fit a lot of users into this one structure and then connect it to the Burtis House, which is the only remaining building in the area from that area. There are no other buildings around it for context, but we will be able to tell the story of that house and the watermen in this area through that building and through the installations we put in it. But just to put it in perspective, we are designing a building that has to house brand new bathrooms, brand new boater facilities, like I said, laundry, showers. Then it has to also, we look forward to a partnership with the National Park Service, house some usage there for the National Park Service. We will be knocking down that old building and the office for the Conference and Visitors Bureau. They'll have to be housed in this building too on the ground floor. They have some retail components they want to bring to the waterfront. We see this Waterfront Welcome Center as an interpretation of what used to happen there. You used to be able to drive onto a ferry and get across the bay from Annapolis. Our modern interpretation of that is you're going to be able to roll on with a bike onto an electric ferry and move around in a micro transit kind of way between different assets that spring from this city. And then, of course, on the upper floor, we're going to have to fit in our new harbor master space. We are planning on putting a big balcony on that building so that we can maybe host events on that balcony. Maybe tourists can just go up to that balcony and look out on the Chesapeake Bay. We plan on having a shared conference room for the National Park Service, for the Conference and Visitors Bureau, and for the city. A lot of things going on in a two-story building, but with that will not be able to happen without this resolution, without this change in the floodplain. We have momentum. We have a lot of money on the horizon, and that money on the horizon depends on designing this thing in under 12 months. That's why I'm here today, to urge you to move this forward. This is not something we just have started yesterday. This has been in plans for years now. And you know that the CityDoc Action Committee have worked diligently to get us to this point. So I ask even the people that are against this to please, and there are only a few, to listen to the experts, to listen to John Manasseh, listen to Eileen Fogarty. You've seen the work that she's done around the country. Listen to David Gerald, listen to Burr Vogel, listen to Eric Lashinsky. They are experts in what they do. They are making sure, and through our emergency management, through the great work they're doing to write these grants, listen to them, because we need to move this forward so we can protect the next big threat to this city, which is sea level rise, and also the next catastrophic weather event. The longer we wait, the more we are exposed. So please consider that. Thank you for all the work you do. I'm looking forward to the next stage of our amazing redevelopment and reimagining of this city. And we couldn't do it without you all. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the worst positions to be in is after the mayor, because the mayor gives everybody my entire presentation. So I will try and be short. This evening, we also have John Manasseh, our FEMA expert, with us, and Bryce Turner, as the mayor mentioned. Would you like to put up the slides, Eric?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
So while Eric is putting up the slides, what we'd like to do tonight is talk to you about two things. I would like to give you, next slide, please, a quick overview of the context of this ordinance and what the necessity for it. And Eric is going to spend some time and talk to you about all of the technical details of the ordinance and its compliance. So the mayor, mentioned the critical nature. Everything we're doing here tonight is not about something citywide or not about other flood districts. It is part of a planning process for the city dock. And when you look at why are we here, we're here because we're looking at almost 1,000% over 50 years increase in nuisance flooding. So the city was a few years ago and is today, along with the Naval Academy, facing an existential crisis. And the way the city has chosen to deal with that, next slide, please, is to, first of all, look at all of in the case of this particular ordinance, we went back to the Cultural Resource Hazard Mitigation Plan, which I was one of the authors. We also have worked very, very closely with the Naval Academy. We were, David Gerald, Burr Vogel, and I were together with the Academy yesterday at a large presentation, an international gathering, people from literally all over the world coming to hear the Naval Academy and the city of Annapolis tell them how we are leading the way in terms of resiliency and dealing with the threats faced by climate change, one of the interesting questions asked to us was, why spend all this money? Why make this major effort? And this was asked to the Navy as well. Why not just leave? Well, of course, the answer from the city is, this is our historic city. And what we're doing, including building up, is saving our city so that we can have this city in 50 years. And the Naval Academy's answer was interesting as well. They said, we started from the position that we are not leaving, and from there we've moved forward. So that is how a preeminent historic coastal city responds to an impending threat. Next slide, please. We've talked to you about the resiliency approach. You know and understand the idea of the natural land barriers being 8 feet up, the flood devices, which are deployable. But what's to remind everybody, a piece of this approach, an element of this tiered approach to create a line of defense from Newman Street to Gate Zero is, first of all, elevating infrastructure, and secondly, elevating new construction to meet the FEMA floodplain. Next slide, please. This slide you have seen, but this is just a reminder for the public who are looking this evening. The lines, the red and yellow lines, are the heights that the streets, the roads, the barriers, the city dock will be elevated to. And you are looking in the vicinity of the Welcome Center and the Burtis House at the park at 8 feet, and the area immediately adjacent at 6.5. Next slide, please. This is a map that you saw in your attachments on the staff report. This area, in whatever color green that is, electric green, shows the area where there is a requirement. And again, this is the city's requirement coupled with FEMA. FEMA's requirement is 5 feet above sea level. The city's requirement is an additional 2 feet above sea level for a total of 7 feet. So that electric green area is the area where new construction, new buildings will have to be elevated to 7 feet. Next slide, please. So our purpose this evening is really the next step in implementing the City Dock Resiliency Strategy. As the mayor mentioned, we brought together, just for the purpose of this ordinance, a team with FEMA experts, architects, again, authors of the Cultural Hazard Mitigation Plan, resiliency experts, and of course our land use attorneys. And the purpose is to align the FEMA requirements with the way we measure buildings in the city dock only in the AE flood zone area. This will, and the mayor referred to this, and I will refer to it in a couple minutes again. This will, in addition to bringing us into compliance with the flood insurance program, it will unlock critical federal funding for the city dock. What you see in this graphic on I'm looking on my left, I think it would be on your left, is the city dock, the elevation, the 8-foot elevation of the city dock. And then you see on your right what will be a cross section or the elevations of new construction. Currently, new construction is measured from 3.5 feet existing grade. And that's in this particular area. It varies depending on the area, but in this particular area, it's about 3.5 feet. Again, when you add the FEMA requirement and the city requirement, you are looking at 7 feet. And like I said, if you add a basement, John Manassas tells us that we'll add an additional foot, but that brings you to the height of what will be the surrounding infrastructure. Next slide, please. I have a point that I'd like to share. I know the commission knows this, but would like to share it with the public. Tonight's ordinance is just a part of the planning process. The larger process involved, of course, the consensus plan, all of the implementation, which is parking, mobility, the garage, resiliency. Then the Planning Commission and the public have seen the conceptual design for City Dock. The ordinance tonight only does one thing. It allows the design of the public structures for the Waterfront Welcome Center to proceed. After this ordinance, there will be an extensive design process that will include the full City Dock Action Committee, the City Dock Design Team, the Planning Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, and of course, Council. So this ordinance is simply to allow a design process to proceed. Next slide, please. And the other aspect is what the mayor has said, that with this ordinance, we can move forward. We are ahead of schedule with the garage, which is just amazing. And kudos to everybody who's contributed to that effort, including the businesses and residents who've worked hard to weather this difficult period without a garage. Construction should begin on the City Dock in this coming winter 2024. The City Dock effort is tied, the whole effort comprehensively, and what you see in this visual is tied to the funding. We have been very successful in receiving funding to date, but we are looking at very significant funding from FEMA, and FEMA has requested that we bring forward the design, not just of the park, but of the Waterfront Welcome Center as well, for them to actually grant us the funding. They want the design of the entire area. That is where the timing comes from, because we had initially thought we would just do this in phases. The construction will take place in phases, but to unlock that a very, very significant federal grant, we need to bring in the fall, probably be later fall, the entire project. So we are looking to have the design, which go through a very rigorous process over the next several months so that we will be able to unlock the federal funding. And with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Eric. Next slide.
Okay. Thank you, Eileen. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning, Planning and Zoning Department. I put together the staff report in consultation with John Manassa, who is our certified floodplain manager for the city. He's also the division chief for permitting and inspections and intimately familiar with our standards for building in the floodplains. But I'm here to just unpack the legislation, the logic of it, basically explain the nuances of it so you understand why it's necessary beyond what Eileen just mentioned. Just complement her presentation, get a little bit deeper into the legislation. Excuse me. And so to do that, I kind of need to contextualize this a bit more. So I'm starting off with this excerpt from FEMA's flood insurance rate map for the city of Annapolis. And this is just a standard FEMA product. They produce these maps for coastal areas all over the country. It shows, importantly, the elevations that buildings need to be built at to be safe from future flooding. So you can see here in light blue, this is the AE zone. What that means is the 1% annual chance of flooding, or 26% chance of flooding in the 30-year life of the mortgage of a building in that area. You can see they've identified it as buildings need to be at 5 feet elevation for that city dock area. The orange areas represent areas of more extreme flooding. You can see that, none of this should really be new to most of you, but the city dock is our most vulnerable flood zone, and it's almost consumed by that AE zone. Now, the city has participated in the National Flood Insurance Program since 1981. We have to abide by FEMA standards to do that. We are currently, as Eileen mentioned, we require building elevations to be above their 5-foot base flood elevation in this area. But what we don't do is measure from that. And so this legislation is really about how do we measure a building when it's in this flood zone. And so I wanted to share this graphic from a section of our city code that focuses on definitions, terms. It shares this very simple graphic for building height. This is a overly simplistic diagram, but it basically tells you, you're starting from a ground level and you're measuring to the highest point in the building to get that building height. Now, this is a general way of measuring throughout the city, but as you might know from dealing with legislation and projects over the years, nothing is regular across the city. We have nuances in every zoning district of the city, and you can see this note here, refer to chapter 21.56 for measurement of building height in the historic district. Well, what does that say? You go to that section for our historic district overlay zone, and it says, for the purposes of achieving a permanent height limit, the height of a building shall not be allowed to increase because of an increase in the elevation of the front setback line occurring after the effective date of this zoning code. So essentially, it sort of locks in amber the building elevation that you measure from, despite the fact that we are seeing kind of unprecedented change happening all around the city dock area due to sea level rise and increased frequency of storms. So city dock project aligns with that AE zone. We're essentially raising everything in the city dock area to be above that flood elevation. We're going to a level that Eileen mentioned is over what FEMA requires. The city requires 2 foot beyond that. And that's our primary strategy for adapting to the climate change conditions that we're dealing with here. So everything is being raised, but what we have is a requirement currently that any buildings in this area don't raise. They stay at that. You measure the building height from an elevation that's below that flood elevation. 3.5 is the number that was shared earlier. So in a sense, we're trying to align the way we measure building heights with the work we're doing to protect the city dock from flooding. You saw this map earlier. I just want to share it again just to say that, this is a portion of the historic district overlay zone. You can see the blue line for the AE flood zone. It's a fraction of the overall historic district overlay zone, but it's the area that floods heavily throughout the year and is the most vulnerable part of the city. And obviously it's the place where the cost economically and culturally is the greatest, and that's why we're spending so much energy and money on this part of the city. You can see here how that city dock project aligns. And so, when you look at the legislation, this is targeted at this place because this is where we've done extensive analysis. There's not a place in the city that has been more extensively studied in terms of climate change and the impacts of flooding. It is normal to basically have legislation follow from detailed study, and that's what's going on here. The the project is essentially an intensely master planned site. So the legislation applies to this area, the city dock site, as it was defined in the City Dock Action Committee's final report that came out in 2020. And that's the definition you see here. Now, the AE zone is not limited to the city dock area. It is a citywide flood zone. It's nowhere as impactful as the city dock area. I'm highlighting that here. I mean, it has impacts in Eastport. It has impacts in other parts of downtown, in West Annapolis, but there's nowhere that you can really compare in terms of impact to culturally, economically, what these floods are doing to the downtown area. And so I want to just sort of put in perspective, you know, the idea that this legislation should apply citywide is something that we've considered. Now, there's a great amount of reason why that doesn't make any sense. And I wanted to share something that is part of my thinking about this as a comprehensive planner. And, you know, I would acknowledge that I try to plan comprehensively whenever I can. But in this situation, it makes most sense to target the city dock area, which is a unique place in terms of the planning work that has happened over the last few years. We have a significant amount of funding in hand. We are raising the right-of-ways around existing and planned buildings. We're not doing that anywhere else in the city. Beyond that, when you look at other zoned areas of the city on the waterfront, what you'll see is very nuanced guidelines regarding building height measurement that are different from the city dock area, the historic district overlay zone. And so I want to just give you an example of what I mean by that. If you look across the harbor at Eastport, where we have two different maritime zones, the waterfront maritime mixed, which is this darker teal color, and then the waterfront maritime Eastport, WME, is the more turquoise color. Now, these are areas that are both impacted by that AE flood zone as well. But when you look at the bulk regulations for the waterfront maritime mixed district, now this is the area, for context, where the Annapolis City Marina is, where Chart House Restaurant, that stretch of Eastport. This is what you see. You see for building height, you see a range of guidelines that are fairly complicated. They're based on, you know, where is the building in relation to Severn Avenue, 50 feet or less, 50 to 65 feet, over 65 feet. You see references to the existing grade along Severn Avenue. You see references to sky exposure plane. You know, needless to say, our zoning code has been adapted over a few generations to be highly nuanced and specific across the city, one place to another. And it does make planning challenging in the city. And you know, we do create legislation for specific places where it makes most sense. And in this case, it would be extremely challenging to adapt similar legislation across the city to apply to these districts that all have varying requirements today. Now, we have a number of plans in recent years that I think point to the value of doing legislation that is specific to the city dock area. I'm just going to kind of close with a summary of those. In my role, I refer to these plans every day to understand what the recommendations have been that you know, my thinking should build on. And so it starts with the 2009 comprehensive plan. That was our last adopted comprehensive plan. This comprehensive plan, as with almost I would say every comprehensive plan since 1962, when we started doing comprehensive planning, treat the city dock as a very different place in the city from almost everywhere else. It's has unique challenges and needs and values, and so the recommendations are highly specific to the city dock. Here you can see that highlighted that this is where the encouragement to do the city dock action plan is highlighted, and we followed through on that in years after this comprehensive plan was adopted. It highlights the challenges that part of downtown is facing, and the need to come up with strategies to deal with those challenges, and that's what we've done as a city. Now, this plan from 2018 that I think Eileen mentioned earlier, the Weather It Together plan, cultural resource hazard mitigation plan. And this is very, very specific to the city dock area, and particularly the cultural resources in that area. And what I found interesting in this plan is it identifies the issue we're trying to solve with this legislation, this idea that, while it might be challenging, within a historic preservation context to think about raising elevation, it's an important tool to use. We don't have much choice. We're trying to protect the value that we have in this part of the city. And so it identifies that as a really important tool for protecting the city dock. It also talks about the specific idea of raising the public realm in this area, and the importance of correlating how the buildings interface with that raised public realm. That's I would say the principal challenge, to the city dock design and what we're trying to address here. Finally, this is a general plan dealing with hazard mitigation in the city that was released in 2018. It's been updated. There's a draft plan that's being circulated right now. I've been part of a stakeholder group reviewing the updated version. But this one, following this trend, it zeroes in on the city dock as a specific place that warrants specific legislation because of the level of impact that we're seeing there. And it just sort of reinforces the other plans, I think, that I've shared tonight. So that's a bit more of an overview of the legislation, but with that, I think we can take questions, and I'm going to stop sharing the
Eric, hi, this is Diane Butler. I have a quick question. From a couple of the pictures you showed earlier, I get the impression that you haven't gotten consent past any of the businesses or that go further than Newman Street. Is that correct? So you still don't have the Fleet Reserve and other businesses, the yacht basin on board with this, with the plan?
Eric, unless is David on the line? If he's not, I can respond to that. We have been meeting with a couple of the businesses, the Public Works Director, David Gerald, and Burr Vogel, and I, we certainly have support from the fleet. We've also been meeting with one of the other businesses several times in the last few weeks. And so we are looking at two of the businesses now two of the properties we're working with. And of course, we're going to be reaching out to the others as well.
Thanks. It sounds like it would be in their best interest to join in this plan, and it's still surprising if they're not doing it. Thanks.
It would be.
Yeah, so Eric, I have a couple of questions. So just if I could sort of, get down to just a really quick summary of essentially what this legislation says, is it basically says that once you redefine what the baseline is, the absolute height basically goes up 7 feet. I mean, is that a pretty succinct way to state it?
It goes up 4 feet. It would go up the difference between what we're starting at now and what we're raising the surrounding the street elevation to, the park elevation. So yeah.
Okay, and obviously the plan is to raise Dock Street, so that goes up, and that gets at this, you know, what you highlighted in the code about the historic district, that you know, regardless of that baseline, the height can't go up. And I mean, am I wrong saying that was probably put in the code to prevent somebody from gaming the height, so that they can't just like pour a bunch of concrete in front of their building that's 3 feet deep and say, now I can go 3 feet higher? So it's meant to prevent the gaming that way. So clearly this isn't gaming per se. Let's see. Also, so in the way, in essentially, this is really, you could consider this basically a federal mandate, because, you know, in order to get flood insurance, you have to comply with those, you know, with those requirements. So it's not like this is something that Annapolis dreamed up. This is basically something that's being required if you want to get flood insurance. So it's a mandate, and that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
And what, you know, one other question about the design is and maybe this is more for Eileen, but at some point will the level of Prince George Street be raised up? You know, so it's not a sinkhole. You know, eventually that will come up a few feet. Maybe is that kind of the plan?
Yeah, Alex, Prince George Street will be raised at least the and Bryce is on the call, at least the easterly portion of it is going to be raised a few feet, because there's going to be a new park, and then the street will come up to that. Bryce, do you want to, you've seen those drawings as I have. I mean, they're very just conceptual. Want to answer Alex's question?
Sure. Well, I think the important thing to be thinking about is the general context and topography around this entire area is going to be raised, and wherever we can, we don't want to jack up the Burtis house and make it look ridiculous with the existing grade, of course. So we have planned a small little pocket park, if you will, at the foot of Prince George Street that will need to be elevated by a few feet. So yeah, it will be about 3.5, 4 feet above sea level, and will transition up to the elevation of the house and any other structures that are near there. So yeah, that will get us up to, you know, we want to be up to at least 3.5 to 4.5 feet above sea level for the lowest spots.
Yeah, and the idea is you don't want it to look like a house on the Jersey Shore on poles, basically. Yeah. So
I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And so this is one last question. This is really for Eric. So in terms of limiting it, and I saw that there's a couple of amendments that I think we're going to hear some testimony on later. The talk that change it to be citywide, and the question I had is how do you make this ordinance just apply to a certain area that doesn't get you into spot zoning problems? So like you can't say, well, this applies to the WMC zone because it's really stuff on the outside of that. And like, how do you do that in a way that it's legal? It's kind of a naive question.
This is
just
really,
curious.
No, it's a good question. I mean, this is no different than we do small area plans all the time within comprehensive planning. We focus on a neighborhood. We focus on, a portion of the city that has a kind of a consistent a consistency to it, and so the city dock master plan is essentially a small area plan. It's not just it includes a public realm, it includes streetscape, it includes the dock improvements, buildings, so it's an intensely master planned site, and I think for that reason, it makes sense. It's not. I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but how do you do it in a way that doesn't run you afoul of basically spot zoning? So like the stuff on Dock Street, the private land on Dock Street's zoned what, C1 or something? How do you say, well, this applies there, but not in a similar zone in another part of the city? I haven't looked at all zones, so I don't know if that's actually a realistic scenario, but that's just the thing that strikes me about saying, well, it's only, it only pertains to this area. And I'm not making a value judgment out of it. I'm sure you guys have thought about how you can do this in a way that's legal. I hope.
Well, Alex, I
It's
think
totally
a
legal.
good point that Eric brought up is that, and the city has not done this. Other jurisdictions, I mean, California, we did specific plans all the time because we had the funding to do the public infrastructure. In theory, you do a comprehensive plan and then you do an area plan. Inner West Street would have been an area plan. The Maritime is an area plan. It's the next level down. What this is even more specific because it involves a commitment to or a commitment to public funding. And that is when you see areas throughout the country where there's a real positive change, that's what is needed. So it is an area plan. It is very specific, and it applies only to this area because this is where, the area that has been designated, there's not an area plan for Eastport, or there's not
So
an area plan for
you can,
Merrill.
yeah, I'm sorry to drag this on, but so basically think of it as an overlay. Basically, it's like we have other overlays in the city that touch certain zones in certain zones in ways that are not affecting the similar zones in other places because they're outside the overlay. Is that the way to think about that? I'm just trying to get my head around the rest of our Byzantine mess. So okay. I don't mean to I don't mean to drag this on anymore. So. But
another way to think about it, there was very deliberate decisions, as to why the city dock site was framed the way it is, and it's heavily based on the flood vulnerability. And that's the big driver. So from that perspective, I would say it's probably more objective than, in some cases you do small area plans for neighborhood areas where somebody might have some disagreement about whether they're in the neighborhood or not, or what their neighborhood identity is. But there's no arguing about the data that's we're seeing for this city dock area. So
yeah, I'm not raising any question about whether this is a good thing to do or not. I'm just trying to get it all straight in my head, sort of how you actually implement this. That's all. So I'm sorry to drag it on that far. I can think about this more.
Well,
later. So,
and just to follow up a little bit, I guess, from what you were just saying, Alex, I'm curious because it sounds like it's it's the urgency of the funding for the city dock that's pushing forward this limited aspect of the ordinance, because the FEMA flood plain shows all the areas in the city that are subject to the rising sea level. So theoretically, we should all be adopting the same law at one time. So I think Eric did a good job trying to explain why these other areas aren't going to be included in the ordinance. But I think it really comes down to the urgency of making sure we get the city dock funding. Is that accurate?
Diane, the urgency is certainly a portion of it, but the real issue is that if you kind of think of it as a planner, as a planning director, we have an area in the city that we have very specifically planned. This ordinance is part of implementing that plan. The fact that there are other areas that have floodplains at this moment is not our concern. In other words, we have an area, it has a floodplain, we have a resiliency strategy. This has to be done to implement the resiliency strategy. And yes, it is urgent, but it was not the urgency that left out the other areas. It was specifically planned for this area. It was not a citywide plan, nor was it intended to be, nor should it be. At some point, there may be a plan for Eastport in which they want to look at all of these factors. That is a completely separate effort.
And so maybe if there was a plan, like a small area plan for Eastport or West Annapolis, then we would be considered for inclusion in this ordinance, or the ordinance would apply potentially to those areas that are impacted by the floodplain.
If there was a plan.
Yeah, in fact,
If we had a plan.
we
So
have
we
a
should-
recommendation. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we have a recommend. It's one of the top things I hear, in putting together the comprehensive plan update is, a resilience plan for Eastport. So, I mean, that's definitely.
And I don't want to be just
in the cards
too focused on Eastport, but because that floodplain does reach into other areas of the city, so they, all areas of the city should be considered for this ordinance at some point as we go forward as well. Or a similar ordinance.
Yeah, I didn't, so just my one last comment to that. I didn't mean to imply that it should be citywide, and I think you guys have made a reasonable case that it's applicable only here for the reason you stated. I just was trying to understand how you implement it. So anyway, sorry to drag us down that path. So, and Eric, do you have anything else you want to say, or questions from other commissioners?
This is Teresa. I think one way to help frame this, so as I'm reading through the staff recommendations, we keep referring to, specific parts of the city, specific areas, specific neighborhoods. And I think the staff report or the staff recommendations were very succinct in carving this out and being specific, FEMA zone AE within this criteria and the urgency surrounding that area. It makes sense. Is it safe to assume that in the next 50 years, as sea level rise, that those kind of zoned levels, as far as from a FEMA category of hazard areas, more of the city could be covered by this, just based on time and risk, right? So I think having it labeled in that way, or at least succinctly written in that way, is very specific to the level of urgency at this point, unless I'm missing something.
No, that's accurate.
Thanks, Teresa. Other commissioners?
It seems that it's obvious that it's necessary. It's obvious that it's targeted. And it's obvious that we need to do something quickly on it. But just to answer the question about whether it's spot zoning or not, I'm not going to bore you with what I'm reading here, which is basically law review stuff, but this is not spot zoning. It's an action taken as a consequence of a lot of comprehensive planning, as Mr. Lashinsky and Ms. Fogarty have pointed out. It is meant to benefit the municipality as a whole rather than one individual or one party. It's not changing the land use designations in any way whatsoever. It's really just changing building height specifications. So when and if the time comes to do something on a more comprehensive basis around the Eastport Peninsula, that time will come, but it's not now. Anything else? Is there anybody? No.
Slam dunk.
Yeah, really, lots of facts. Thank you. Thank you, team. City team.
Yeah, so I let's just leave it as any commissioners have other clarifying questions, because I mean, I don't want to get into discussion on this today because we have 2 people signed up to testify, and I want to get to them. But I just want to make sure that we all have had a chance to ask questions so we understand exactly what's in front of us. And we'll hold this open till the next meeting, and then we'll deliberate on it, as is our standard process. But so any other commissioners have clarifying questions?
No, just thank you, Eileen and Mayor Buckley. It was pretty simple.
Yeah,
great.
Thanks for the presentation.
Great. So at this point, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to open the public hearing, and so we have 2 people signed up. I think it was in this order: Alderwoman Tierney and I'm sorry, I forget who, but somebody from Historic Annapolis, I believe. Is that right, Julian?
That is correct. Yeah, Rachel Robinson.
Okay, so
We also had
Matt Fleming.
Mr. Chair, I think Matt Fleming also signed up to testify, but
okay,
he was brought forward already.
Okay, I hadn't seen that, but let's go in the order of Alderwoman Tierney, then Ms. Robinson, and then Mr. Fleming.
Oh, me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Hi. So I'm going to be really brief because I don't want to repeat my testimony. In fact, I'm not sure of the sequence of this, but I can withdraw my testimony as it subsequently has been addressed by the staff report prepared by Eric Lashinsky. And of course, there's that has to be translated into an amendment, which he calls a clarification. So as we speak, our law office is doing that. And very simply, what Eric did is exactly was my concern, was to define this area so that it spoke to the FEMA designations as well as our city code. And then there's no need then, and referenced a map that existed. I want to publicly say that I was not motivated to stall a project, a building, or whatever. I, as all of you know, have a background in engineering, and I know it's not sexy, but this project is about flooding. And let's not forget that it's about flooding. And we got a one piece of legislation on first reader with nothing attached, with misalignment, with the 300 pages of our FEMA report, no references. And that concerned me. And because I want this project to move forward and I want to do it right. And the fact that you're all here now, is a response to my concerns. And I want to really thank you for that. I believe that tonight it's getting the attention it deserves. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the testimony. And up next, Ms. Robinson.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you. I have a weak signal, so please alert me if this is not clear. Rachel Robinson. I am the Vice President at Historic Annapolis. HA has long been part of City Dock reimagining and advocacy, and we support the infrastructure project. It is crucial that all development around City Dock complement the project while being cohesive and sympathetic to the protected historic district. HA supports the intent of O1523 to address compliance with standards pertaining to the AE flood zone, a special flood hazard area designated by FEMA. The language, however, needs improvement. Primary concerns are that it needs to adequately define the area of exception, be fully compatible with city code, and be applied equally and fully throughout the historic district, if not across the whole of Annapolis where the AE zone exists. HA supports Alderwoman Tierney's previous two amendments. We believe that at minimum, the area of applicability should be defined as the AE zone with the historic district. Limiting the height measurement exception to CDOC is arbitrary, and CDOC is not a legally defined area. Ideally, accompanying legislation would address base flood elevation compliance in AE zones outside the historic district.
Did we lose Miss Robinson, I think?
I can't hear her at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she dropped off. She's back, I think now.
Sounded like she was wrapping up anyway. Is that true?
Hello?
Is you there? There she is.
Yes, I'm here. Hello?
Okay. Yep. Have you completed your remarks, or?
I will submit this so that you can read it. I'm sorry that I'm having connection issues. I just wanted to underscore that our support of the height increase in the historic district is relative to sea level rise only. Base flood elevation and freeboard increases to height are specifically defined and purposeful, and we support their addition to the current height limits. HA does not support additional height increases within the historic district for out of scale development. This is in accordance with the CDAC final report. I just also wanted to mention that I think this has contributed to some confusion about this legislation. We understand the city's freeboard to be 2 feet as defined in the city code. The ordinance, however, states 1 foot. So this needs to be confirmed and corrected. And as the Planning Commission, you know that planning and zoning issues can be complicated, difficult to understand, but that doesn't mean that the public does not want to be involved with the future of CityDoc and our city. We appreciate your thoughtful review of O1523 and hope that you will take our concerns and those from the public into consideration for your report to City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those remarks. Appreciate it. Next up is Mr. Fleming.
Yeah, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, yep. Here.
Okay, good. And my camera's not coming off, so luckily for you guys, I'm sparing you guys from having to look at me. So just real quick, good evening. My name is Matt Fleming. I'm the director for the Resilience Authority for Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. Thanks to the mayor's leadership and the county executive's leadership, the Resilience Authority is the first of its kind institution. It's been established to accelerate the pace and scale of infrastructure improvements needed to prepare and adapt our region to climate change. Prior to my role as the director of the Resilience Authority, I spent 25 years with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, where I most recently served as the Assistant Secretary for Aquatic Resource, so in charge of all the water side policy of the department. But I also served as the Maryland Coastal Zone Program Director, where in addition to ensuring the wise use and conservation of the state's coastal resources, I was responsible for helping Maryland's coastal communities prepare for and respond to climate change. So while I'm deeply honored to serve as your Resilience Authority Director, my comments tonight are coming from my experience as Maryland's Coastal Zone Program Director. I'm sure you guys know far better than I do, the Planning for You isn't the first to take on the flooding problems in downtown Annapolis. More than a half dozen studies have been conducted during the past 3 decades. Unlike its predecessors, and thanks to a lot of the creativity from folks like David Jarrell, Eileen Fogarty, Eric, and some of the brightest financial minds in the region, this project is moving forward. There's some significant momentum. So later next month, when Annapolis opens its Hillman Garage, in addition to adding more parking spaces, the planners had the foresight to connect the opening of the Hillman Garage with the financing of the CityDoc Resiliency Project. So when you couple that financing with a lot of the state and federal grants, which I also used to manage on behalf of the state, many of these grants are time bound. The city has been able to these grants that the city has been able to raise through county, state, and federal sources. This kind of complex web of resources and partners seems to be falling into place to make this flood remediation project a reality. So kind of preparing prepare for climate change in City Dock, or how that relates to City Dock. Certainly you guys are all here, and you guys know this, we're all here tonight discussing this project. It's climate disruption is real. It's not an ideological issue any more than gravity is. It's physics, pure and simple. Costly and often devastating effects of flooding, storm, and extreme heat are already being felt within our area. This is especially true in areas like Annapolis, that experienced the largest increase of any U.S. city nuisance flooding over the last 50 years. When I was at the Department of Natural Resources, we created what was called the Maryland Coastmark Council back in 2014, and they were tasked with adopting specific siting and design criteria to address the impacts associated with sea level rise and coastal flooding on state infrastructure and investments throughout the state. But we were among the first in the nation to establish such guidelines for state infrastructure. We realized that we were not keeping pace with the sea level rise and coastal flooding events that were happening around Maryland or within our coastal zone. So in 2020, we went on a pretty comprehensive update to our CoastSmart construction program to require that structures or highway facilities not only address projected sea level rise, but also be designed to and constructed or reconstructed in a manner to withstand a storm surge from a Category 2 hurricane, including a requirement for structures to be constructed or reconstructed at a minimum elevation above the protected storm surge. Furthermore, the Department of the Environment developed a risk reduction mapping layer, which we refer to as a CoastSmart action boundary, to implement these new requirements in order to optimize the resilience of state-owned infrastructure to future sea level rise and coastal flooding. I would like to note that this tool received national recognition by FEMA. So bringing this all to a close, I applaud Eric's effort and the city's effort, planning staff for bringing the same level of thinking that we did back when we did this comprehensive update to the CoastSmart construction program and their plans for City Dock as they are in line, and using these elevation strategies to mitigate the risk of chronic flooding. So with that, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to offer these comments, and thank you for this commission's important work.
Great, thank you for those comments. Appreciate it. So at this point, we have nobody else signed up to make comments tonight. So we'll hold this public hearing open until our next meeting. And so if there's anybody else who wants to comment, please sign up to make comments at our next meeting. And at that point, then we'll close the public hearing and discuss what our recommendation should be. So thank you all for the presentation. It was very enlightening.
But Mr. Chairman, before you conclude, I do have a question.
Okay, shoot.
Is there any what's the timeline on this? Eileen, maybe you can tell us when does this need to go to council, and help us out here?
We were hoping to get final action at your next meeting, which I believe is June 2nd. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
First week in June.
So if we could get final action so that we could go to council at their June meeting, that would be terrific.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll close the hearing, have our deliberations and recommendation at the end of the next meeting, and we'll easily get that. I don't know if there's a council meeting the following Monday, but certainly we'll be able to get it to you.
You need to have findings. You need to have findings and so forth in order to take our approval if we approve it to council.
Eric, do you? I think the answer is yes, but do you know the answer to that, Eric?
We would, but I just have to look at the calendar, see if that. So it's actually June 1st would be the next planning commission meeting.
Yeah, two
I'm
weeks
not
from
sure
today.
I'm not sure offhand if the city council meeting is the Monday right after
Council
that.
meeting is the 12th.
Okay, so I mean, we'll be able to, once we discuss it and make a recommendation, we'll be able to turn this around, because typically we write these for recommendations on legislation. We're going to write these ourselves, so we'll make sure that we we do that expeditiously, whatever we choose to do. That
So
should be
I didn't get an answer. In order to have it look, in order to have the legislation be deliberated on by council, do they need a findings and opinion from us?
I believe the answer is yes.
You think they do?
Yeah, they do.
All right, even if our role is simply to recommend approval or disapproval. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think it's behooves us to include our reasoning for why we choose one way or the other. But again, I think that's not going to be a problem because these are things that we do on our own, and we can do those expeditiously.
Okay.
So, okay.
All right, good. Very informative. Thanks, guys. It's good.
Yep. All right. Thank you all. I really appreciate it. Sorry to drag us down a few paths just to answer my curiosity questions. I appreciate that. Okay. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
So we'll get on to one last piece of business, unfinished business, and that is the order and opinion for 161 West. As the motion we made prior to the last meeting, to have a draft of that, 24 hours before the meeting. We did that, came up with a draft and circulated that around yesterday, and several people made some I think relatively minor comments that were certainly can be changed in the draft. I think that's not an issue. So I don't know if everybody's at this point is comfortable with the enough of what the draft you've seen, barring some minor edits that I think Ms. Butler made, and whether you guys are willing to vote on approval of those that order and opinion. If so, I would entertain a motion to that effect.
I have something I want to bring up, and I hope that I don't sound like an nasty old man here. Curmudgeon, I think, is the word that they usually apply to me. But there was one thing in that whole thing that kind of struck me, and actually it was Diane that brought it to my attention, and that is that the phrase was something like, the sentence was something like, the commission decided by a preponderance of the evidence one thing or another. And I had never, and I think I don't need to speak for Diane, but I had never seen that in anything that we've ever done. And as Diane pointed out, it's not in the code anywhere that says anything. It may be that it's implicit in everything that we do, that, oh, of course, we need to be convinced beyond, sort of 50%, maybe this way, maybe that way. We need to feel more strongly one way or the other, but it never doesn't say that anywhere. And I'm a little hesitant to start putting in stuff like that, putting in these kinds of legalisms that simply might be seized upon by appellants, complaining about we didn't decide by that standard or whatever. I mean, they're paid a lot of money to pull on strings and to unravel the rug. I just don't think it's a good idea to put that in when we're not kind of obligated by the code or by anything that we're empowered or authorized or ordered to do. I don't think it's a good idea, but it may not be important to anybody else. It just seemed that way to me, that it could be problematic in the future. That's all.
Well, I agree that it was. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Ben.
Go ahead. Since you were the one who really started.
Well,
doing
I
it.
raised it only because, right, we haven't used it before. And, our decision is an administrative level decision. And then when it gets appealed and it's in the circuit court, then the legal standard of preponderance of the evidence is what is used. So I was just wondering why we use it at this level, because we're not in a litigation posture. So there may be a good reason. I just didn't understand it. And I know, well, the other question was, is it being used by all the other quasi judicial boards, because if that is the standard and we're all moving there, maybe it makes sense. I just wasn't convinced by, well, I just didn't really understand why we're using it right now. So maybe there is a reason, and maybe Lisa's on the line, I don't know, in the meeting, and she can.
I don't think she's on. I haven't seen her on, so.
Mhm.
But I mean, certainly if that, if that's a holdup for you guys who don't want to vote on it, I'm happy to try to get clarification on that. As
But
a
Mr. Chairman,
non-lawyer.
But you did provide clarification to the request. You explained the reasoning that legal counsel has guided us, and I tend to lean on legal counsel for their legal guidance. And I'm satisfied
But they didn't
with their
explain it.
response.
She didn't explain why. She just explained what preponderance of the evidence means, which I may have misspoke when I said most of us know what preponderance of the evidence means. But yeah, so the question she answered wasn't what I asked. So hopefully, I don't want to hold this up, that's for sure. So maybe we can just approve it and then, go back with that question.
I'm happy to, I think, so as a non-lawyer, makes sense to me, but I'm certainly willing to entertain a discussion more about, is that an appropriate standard for this point in our, and I can't, I'm not equipped to answer that question. And I think
But maybe we could just
take that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Let me just say, I'm happy to take that back to council. But if you guys are willing to essentially approve, the meat of what we did, we can go work those other phrasing things, and not have to wait 2 more weeks to get.
Right.
I mean, that's true. We're
get
talking about
approved,
99% of the language.
Right.
This is one sentence.
So if everybody's willing to, essentially go with the meat of what we said and what we approved, and we can work those other phrasing things.
How about we just make it up and remove the text right now and you're done?
Yeah, we could approve it with the deletion of that phrase. I want to be clear. I want to be clear. It's probable that is a standard by which we should be operating anyway. In which case, let's have the Office of Law or outside counsel sort of, educate us. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Okay. It's just that I don't think that we should be saying these things in our formal written opinions. I don't want to give anybody any chance to pull things out, but it's okay. Let it ride. I would ask that somebody, Office of Law or outside counsel, simply explain to us what if there is a standard within the Annapolis City Code. Okay.
Boards and commissions.
What it is, and how do you make decisions according to that standard? I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with certainly moving this findings and opinion on, because it's taken forever to get to this point.
Agreed.
Yeah. So if everybody's willing to let me get some clarification on that piece, we can approve essentially the meat of it and work that particular language.
Well, I can put forward the motion to approve the findings and opinion with slight modification to that terminology in the draft.
I think that's
what modification?
As in remove
The modification for the terminology of preponderance of evidence.
Oh, delete that little clause.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't understand you.
So your motion is to delete that.
Just to move forward without it, and if I'm indifferent to it. Like I said, I'm comfortable with legal counsel that said it's fine. I also understand if the commissioners aren't in agreement with it in consensus, I'm indifferent. So at this point, I think there is room that we're all in agreement of the findings and the opinion.
Yeah.
As the gist, it's the terminology thing, and I think it's fine to move forward without it.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'll second that, because I just want to get this done. And for the benefit of the applicant, it's we've already taken too long.
All right, and now it's time for discussion, and I'll say it real quickly that putting procedure and process into your findings and opinion is just wasting time. That should be separate in other documents.
Oh, that's an interesting.
And also, if the legal department has an issue with it, they'll come back to us and then we can just, if we have to add it in, we can always vote on it again,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And-
Or
and-
just add it in future
Correct. And
opinions.
to Mr. Sale's point, absolutely, an approval of a template or some sort of draft or whatever should not have been at the detriment to the applicant.
All right, that's cool. We're good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, well, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, well, great. Well, I will get that finalized up and,
Really, point of order, on the draft though, it has two absentia, which was,
Oh,
Mr.
yes,
Seconded and Mr. Waldman, so just an FYI.
yes, that is correct. So,
Yes, I need to abstain from approving the findings also, right?
I don't know, that's why I was
You
asking.
watched the videos and stuff on that. I'm pretty sure. Didn't you say that last time?
No,
No.
That's the only reason I'm pointing it out, just make sure we're
oh,
aligned.
yeah, thank you for that clarification. I had forgotten that. So,
Solely, I had to
That's
abstain
fine.
from the vote to approve the findings and opinion.
that's fine. So it's as written in the document with the 2 abstains.
Got him, Teresa.
All right, great. So I'll get that finalized and we'll get that out. So thank you all.
Thank you.
So I think so then there's, 2 other items that we don't have everything for. And so the last is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll
Second it.
All righty. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you all.